Alrighty, folks, we're going to go ahead and get started with today's boot camp, which is patching automation for the RMM dashboard. Today is going to be a break from our normal webinars where there are a lot of labs. Today is going to be a lot of education and a lot of demo. We'll talk about that as we go through. So housekeeping items number 1. Legal loves to say hi. First statement legal likes to make is, I am not a part of PM, nor am I a part of dev, which means as we talk about forward-facing items, which will be hit on today, I am giving you the information that I know at this moment in time. Development schedules are always subject to change. Release dates are always subject to change, especially because some of the features that we will be talking about getting released are going to be very large updates to the PME or Patch Management Engine tool inside the RMM. So we will talk about what it looks like today, and at the end of the session, we'll have a little bit of a discussion to talk about what it's going to look like in the future. But again, everything I say for that one, subject to change, as again, I am not PM or dev. You can find this recording or a recording of this session at success.enable.com and then to the MSP Institute. Inside the MSP Institute, you will find a previous recording, though we may be updating it with this particular recording in the future, but you got to give us time for editing and the like. Okay, so do be aware of that. Starting off with the let me introduce myself, and then I'll have a couple questions to get to know you folks. My name's Joe Ferla. I've been at Enable just over 5.5 years now. I'm very excited to be in this head nerd role, which I've been here since May, so still reasonably new in the realm of head nerds. And I've held most of the customer-facing positions here at Enable that are regarding some type of account management or dev. I was an account manager just after the Logic Now acquisition, and I have worked also as a sales engineer. I was one of the original creators of the PSM team, and now I am working as a head nerd quite happily. So very excited to be now in my position where, let's be quite honest, I am paid to educate, content produce, and learn, which is just like, I think, my dream. We'll go over our quick agenda here. First off, why are we here? So we'll get a nice little why automate patching conversation. Then we'll go through how patching works inside the RMM, or N-sight RMM as we call it now. And we'll go over some best practices, okay, as well as our site concentrator, which would be using a proxy, and where do we actually start? Some brief best practices, though the where do we start section probably going to be the lightest of the sections today, because we've all started patching in some fashion. On to why is patching so important, right? We all know the 4 things that patching does for us, with fixing vulnerabilities, bringing in new features, improving performance if necessary, and fixing bugs, right? So we are dealing with some pretty base items here. Now, what I typically very much like to point out is patching becomes so important not only for these 4 reasons, but for, in my opinion, the largest reason, and that is software is written by humans. We make a lot of mistakes, okay? And computers are only as good at doing what they need to be as they are told, right? So especially when we are looking at patching, right, all of these 4 items are nice, but I'm maintaining that patch is much more a human error fixer. And we all know how important that is. It is also one of the most important parts of your layered security program, right? So when we look at patching nowadays, right, and we'll make the joke that it's no longer 1995, right, we're patching because malicious actors now have the business plans and the business models to take advantage of getting into devices, right? Back when, you maybe had one internet connected device in your house, if that, right? Patching, we can all remember going to like Windows 7 at the latest and saying, I'm not doing that patch, right? That is no longer where we're at today, right? So some nice little statistics that we're putting up here, right? That we can use when we are talking to our end users and stressing patch and looking at discussing the program, right? But we'll always fall back on 80%, 70% of patching nowadays is designed to keep malicious actors off of your machines. And it's becoming harder and harder for us as MSPs, not only to keep up with those malicious actors, but also to keep our end users safe, since, everybody comes with like 5 internet connected devices just in their pockets and backpack, not to mention everything that you see on the networks you folks are managing. Right. So when we talk about how important patching is and why regular patching is so important, it brings us to, as an MSP, why do we really care about this? Right. And we'll briefly hit on the past 2 slides in that MSPs, in my opinion, don't sell software. Right. What we are selling to our end users, and if you've been to one of my boot camps, you've heard this before, I'm sorry, you're going to hear it again, is we sell productivity and peace of mind. And part of that is safety. And we as MSPs have gone through, created our SOWs, created our SOPs, and put them in our contracts that assure our end users of that. Patch is one of the most common ways that MSPs accidentally break a contract, especially manual patching, right? There's just not the time in the day to get that done. So any type of automation is going to be key here, right? The flip side of that coin is patch is probably one of the more common topics that our end users know about, right? In any type of human relation, everybody is going to try and find some common ground to at least have some small talk about. We can't get around it. It's a little bit annoying from time to time, but we as MSPs have to deal with this more so because our end users are probably not the most technical savvy people. And everybody knows patching because we've all gotten patch pop-ups before without, say, an MSP managing our services, right? Or some type of IT department managing our services. So end users use this as one of their largest metrics to see how an MSP is doing, right? And if they are reasonably technical savvy, they're running their own patch reports, right? I'm paying you a large amount. You look at per user, right? We'll probably look at what, 125 to 175 US to sign with an MSP for fully managed services, right? If I'm a business owner, I'm double checking. That's a good amount of money, right? And patch reports are easy to run. So we care not only because we have to keep our end users up and running, we have to keep them safe. We care because, well, this is what they're most familiar with. This is where they're going to check our contracts. When we look at patching, it is, despite the fact that it's one of our most done tasks, is probably one of the more complicated that we're going to deal with, right? We've got APIs that change almost on a monthly basis. Thank you, Microsoft and Adobe. You're good at making our lives difficult here. The updates are disruptive, right? Think about how many patches we install on a monthly basis that are, one, going to reboot a device, two, take a hot minute and a good amount of resources to download, right? Think about even a 20-person or 20 end users site downloading a 4 gig patch all at the same time. That is just resource drain, right? And then again, you're going to see things like re-releases and updates and the like. Okay. Versioning comes into play with this. If you can keep track of all of the Windows versions and patches that are coming out inside your head and manually do it while keeping each device's version straight inside your head, you are much smarter than I, right? I rely on software to do this for me, and I rely on software to automate this, right? It takes the complexity out, right? It also means when devices aren't available, I don't have to go back and double check them every day, right? I have a solution in place that's going to handle a lot of this for me, and automation is the name of the game when it comes to this. So, patching inside our N-sight RMM dashboard. Okay, we've got 4 basic components that we're going to take a look at today, and we're going to split up our conversation into each of these components here as we are going through patch. Starting off with how patch detection works for us, right? We're going to work with our patch status scan inside the RMM, which we'll see in just a moment. And that scan is going to run in one of 3 fashions. We'll either run it on our daily safety check cycle, which is the default inside the RMM. Default for daily safety checks on servers is 6 a.m. For workstations, it's 10 a.m. At least I believe that is still the split. We also have this manually, our least preferred option, and on a desired schedule, right? I don't want to run this on my daily safety check cycle at 6 a.m. on my servers. I would prefer to run this at, Wednesday and Friday at 9 a.m., right? Giving us a little bit more flexibility inside that schedule. And of course, we've got multiple reporting or alerting modes for this particular scan as we are looking at it, right? So in our patch detection workflow that we see here, we see that our detection scan is triggered by an event in N-sight RMM, right? Going back to the 3 real quick: daily safety check, scheduled times, or a manual command, right? We're going to call wsus to request an update check. If there are any update lists that are needed, we will then send those updates back to the N-sight RMM, and then we will approve and apply our rules as necessary. Where we start with this inside the RMM, and let me get it pulled up here, is we're going to take a look at the status scan, and then we'll look at how we're going to set this up. So starting with my server here, we'll come down into the south pane. And where is our patch status check? All the way down here at the bottom, right? Clicking into the check itself with our hyperlink will bring up the 3 items that we have missed. Okay, so some new releases here, and this is my updated list since December 1st at 6 a.m. So today, right? Nice, quick, simple, and easy peasy. If I don't want to go through my patched status check, I can also come to the patching tab inside the south pane here. Okay, this will give me quick and easy denotation into all of the statuses of our checks, or sorry, all of the statuses of our patches. We'll get into that in just a moment. I promise we won't leave you guys high and dry there. Okay, but suffice to say, I can come in, right click on a patch in any of these statuses, and choose one of my 5 individual actions that I can take. Okay, and again, we'll talk about these a little bit more when we get up into our global level of patching. Okay, What we can also do if we want a more up-to-date patch scan or patch status scan is we can right-click on the device inside the north pane, come to patch management, and click the run patch status. It will now be rerun for this device. Double-clicking on this device, we'll notice that my 24/7 frequency runs every 5 minutes, so that command to that device will resolve itself in 5 minutes, and I'll get results back as early as nowish, right? And as late as 2 runs of my 24/7 check cycle, so 10 minutes at most. Noted, you can also control daily safety check runtime from here if needed. Right? So Howard asked, how long does it take for the manual scan to run? Right? I think double the 24/7 frequency for results back is a reasonable expectation. However, recently, if we come back to our checks, we scroll down to the bottom, we'll see updates from here a little bit quicker than that more often than not. All right. Now, with our patch status check, because it is a check running on our dashboards, we have 2 options when it comes to alerting. We can put it in report mode, my preferred method, or we can put it in alert mode. Okay, alert means when there's a missing patch, the check associated with this patch status scan will fail. Okay, cause a little bit of white noise inside the dashboard. Though a lot of MSPs that I know turn that on, that alerting on for servers. They're more important than workstations in a manner of speaking, right? Report mode will allow you to interact with the check. It will run as normal, but it will never fail. So we don't get any of the alerting out of that. Now, when we talk about alerting of a check itself, that brings us to settings. That brings us to alerts and our alert policy. The alert policy here allows us with workstations or servers to come in and look at adjusting what we are getting alerted for with our patch status check here. Now, I'm in a demo environment, so I have nothing checked here. I don't need the white noise interrupting my workday, but in the real world, I'm going to be very judicious with what I'm looking at getting here. Okay, I need my mission critical items. AV update check probably should be alerted with that failing on a daily basis. Excuse me, had to cough there. My apologies. Right, patch status check on a server probably want to know about. Right, some type of script check. Okay, so be very aware of what we're choosing here, as we don't want to train ourselves to ignore any alert coming out of the RMM. We want them to be actionable items. So patch detection is where we're going to start. Oh, and totally forgot this part of it. Okay, where do we control our detection, scan, and schedule? So coming to settings, coming to patch management, and to feature policy. The feature policy is going to control your settings. So we're going to create one for boot camp on 12/22. And we'll create a desktop and base it on our desktop for right now. General settings just let us update the naming convention, but what we're more focused on here is our patch status scan. Okay, again, we get alert mode and report mode as we may need. Daily safety check cycle, manually running the scan itself, or scheduling the scan. Schedule the scan to run at a daily, weekly, or monthly time of your choosing. Very simple, very easy to set up here. All right, we've detected our patches. Now we've got to think about what we're going to do with applying any type of behaviors to those patches, right? So I know our slide says approvals here, but we will note that we have a little bit more flexibility to interact with our patches than that, right? So patch approving or declining, deferring, anything along those lines can be done either through our patch policy, which will be our automatic method, manually interacting with the patch at the south pane, or inside the management workflow, which we'll see in a moment, or well, run a combo of this. Okay, I rarely see an MSP that does everything manually or everything automatically. 99% of the time, 99.99% of the time, we're going to be working with a combination, a both type option with this, especially because of how the RMM works with our patching. So back to our policies first, and then we'll look at what we are going to do with our approvals on a machine or global basis. All right, approval policy. You'll note inside our patch policy, we approve by severity for our two basic groups here. Okay, we're going to have Microsoft and we are going to have our other vendors section. Here for each of the severities, critical, important, moderate, low, or other, which are either pulled from the metadata of the patch itself, so Microsoft telling us or the vendors telling us, or in the case of some patches, we'll see some slight adjustment, right? The first time I saw this and got surprised with it was, probably about 4 years ago when that WannaCry piece of malware came out, and we got the Spectre malware patches through Windows, right? Blue screen of death, everybody, the first time it came out. Well, critical and important patch from Microsoft, we've denoted as other per industry standard because, well, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me, right? So knowing those patches are important as we have seen names, right? Because, well, once you get a name, you get noticed, right? We'll see some adjustments. Now, what we can choose to ignore, approve, or manually install these patches. Now, ignore is one I see very, very rarely here. More often than not, I see a approve or manual denotation. Select as you will. Approved patches will then automatically start to push as scheduled, which we'll look at in just a moment. Okay. We'll save here. Let's close out here, and we will come to our south pane. Inside the south pane, where we have missing patches denoted, we can come and right-click a patch to choose an appropriate behavior for that specific patch on that individual machine only. Okay? Approve, ignore, do nothing. Of course, reprocess fails does what it says. If a patch fails, you could reprocess it. Pretty simple, right? Uninstall. If a patch is installed and you'd like to uninstall it, we have the ability to do so as well. So taking those appropriate actions, but focusing on the approve, right? We have the ability to do this from the south pane as well. Come in, click approve, and we'll move to our scheduling. Now, highly inefficient if we're doing this machine by machine, right? What we need to be looking at is our management workflow. So settings, patch management, management workflow. The management workflow gives us the ability to sort by individual patch name. So I can come in and sort and search as necessary. I can also search by KB or CVE if needed. I can filter by date. I can filter by individual clients or individual sites as necessary. So let's come down and let's look at only site 2, right? And I can apply my filters. Okay. I can filter by individual status. Okay. Is it missing? Have I already approved it and put it in the pending status? Have I seen it installing, uninstalled? Is it there? Did it fail? What do I need? Okay, we can even force reboot required or ignored. Device type to filter as well. Now, I can select individual patches here, or if I hold the shift key, I can select multiple patches. I can come in and drag and drop. I prefer shift key to select multiple patches. Now, come in, we'll click proceed, and we will choose our behavior on patches. All right, approve does exactly what it says. Yes, let's go ahead and let's install this patch. Ignore moves the patch from the missing container. Okay, so we will no longer get a patch status scan update on that particular patch. It's no longer missing. We know it's there, but we don't want to install it yet. Okay, and it'll move it to the ignored container. It will allow us to still interact with our patch at a global level. This is how we're going to defer patches if necessary, okay? Because we can still interact with them at a global level. Do nothing. Do nothing is for broken patches. Do nothing will take the item, leave it in the missing container, okay? And then it will break the ability to interact globally with those patches. So any patch that's been known to blue screen of death or mess with machines, we use the do nothing denotation, and then we will have to go machine by machine to individually install those patches so that we know those patches are safe. Okay, this is a rarely chosen option, but one that we need to have in here for safety as necessary. Of course, reprocess and uninstall. Still, if it's failed, we try again. If it's installed and we need to remove it, we look at uninstalling it. So very simple, very easy when we're coming through our management workflow. So approval process and how we're going to get that done, either at a global automatic level, a machine, or global manual level, right? Because let's be honest, we're going to be working with both types. Because of the way the RMM is currently set up, especially with such limited options as severity, I don't want to install every patch denoted other, right? I might not want them. Silverlight patches. For some strange reason, I still see them coming out, right? Even on my modern devices. I don't need those. Let's just go ahead and ignore everything Silverlight, right? And it comes out as an other every time. All right. So we've clicked approve, right? In some fashion, be it a automatic, which would be as scheduled, right? Or we have manually denoted that these patches need to go now, or we're pushing them down for later. We immediately need to address the decision of what are the resources that we are going to be taking up with this. Do we need to look at limiting that resource usage by going with a site concentrator? Because once these patches are approved, they have to download. We can have every machine at an individual location install those patches themselves. Or if they're on the same network as one of our servers, we could denote that server as a site concentrator, and it will download the patch for us the first time they're requested, keep those patches open for 30 days, and push those patches when individual devices request them. So please note, however, while the site concentrator does clean up its cache on its own, we get a reset to that counter every time the patch is called for. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. How does installation work for us? Right? Installation is triggered by the N-sight RMM in some fashion. Okay, by one, receiving a list of all approved patches to install. The RMM checks to see if there's a site concentrator. If not, individual patches on individual devices are downloaded by the local agent, installed, and a reboot flag or a automatic reboot occurs. Right? If the site concentrator is available, the site concentrator downloads the patches as it's received the request, and the patches are then copied to the local agent, installed, and reboot behaviors take place. So installing or approving patches. So let's start with my little server here. This Firefox one looks like it might as well need to be installed. We'll go ahead, click approve, and we'll look at approving these patches as we need, right? So when we look at this, we have the ability to say, okay, follow the existing schedule I've set in the policy, which we'll look at in a moment, or we can schedule for a new time and control our reboots as necessary. So let's go ahead, let's push this patch right now, and we'll say this is a server. I don't want this to reboot. I want to control that. Okay, personal opinion here for servers, and this is MSP specific. I don't ever want a server rebooting during business hours, right? So one, I'll probably not patch during business hours, but two, I can also manually control those reboots as necessary. Now, in the real world, I had 20 servers that I worked with, right? Inside my demo environment, I have 4. Not that much work to manually reboot everything. And I'll show you what we're talking about with manual reboots in a moment. Okay. For those of us who are dealing with 100, 1,000, 2,000 servers, well, you know, this becomes a little bit more of a headache. So MSP choice or dealer's choice as you go here. So we'll approve that patch. I'll enter in my password. If I typed properly, awesome. And my patch is going to look at kicking off. We'll see the blue check for telling me a patch has been manually approved. We will see a denotation here telling me that this patch is going to install on its own. The gray means I don't have anything to do, right? Now, if I right click on this device, go to patch management and go to install patches, and either now or later, you will notice I get a schedule. No list of patches here, just a sheer schedule. What this means is I'm going to take anything that's in the pending mode and append its schedule to what I am setting here. Okay, so here looking at scheduling a time, reboot control, and what happens if the machine's off. Right, so simple, easy peasy. Now, globally, to accomplish this, we'll come back to our feature policy, pick the desktop one that we've been working on, and we'll come to our installation schedule. Now, we have the option to pick manual here to make every patch manual, but let's be honest, this is not why we're here. This is just something we should almost never see if we're using patch management inside the RMM. Outside of, at least in the US, some very rare areas where, like, you know, DoD or Department of Defense type stuff is going on, right? So 99.99% of the time, we're going to be operating out of our installation schedule. We have the option of daily, weekly, monthly. Monthly gives us the ability to choose the first, second, third, fourth, or last day of the month, right? So, you know, here, if this was me, I'd probably be looking at doing something on, say, the first Saturday or the last Saturday of the month. However, I do tend to prefer daily and weekly. So choose your time as necessary, choose your days as necessary, and then we'll be able to control our reboot behavior. Are we going to reboot after the installation of a patch? Are we going to do it if the patch is only required, that reboot, or are we going to do it as an always? Please note your end users will get a 5-minute warning after the patch installs that a reboot's going to happen so that they'll have time to save their work and whatnot. Okay. And if we are rebooting after installation, the scheduled missed section, which allows us to run ASAP when the machine turns on, we have the ability to deselect a reboot so that we can set it up to say patch at 7 o'clock at night, always reboot because we're outside of normal business hours. But if we're patching during regular business hours, we can deny that reboot from happening and the end users don't know that we're patching. Okay. Workstations, of course, we're typically going to patch sometime around lunch or sometime out of office hours. Servers tend to be a little bit more fluid here in scheduling, quite nicely, because let's be honest, end users aren't focused on servers to get their day-to-day done, or if they are, they don't know that they are. So some nice items there. Okay. Approval policy and what's going to automatically be approved for patching is always going to be an MSP specific choice. Your installation schedule is going to be an MSP specific choice. Okay. Though your end users may have an opinion on this that probably needs to be taken into account because let's be honest, without our end users, we wouldn't be there and our end users do want to be listened to. Now, if they're telling you something insane, right? Like I'd like my servers to patch at 10 a.m. and reboot after the patch, that kills what we're selling, productivity and peace of mind, right? Let's have a conversation with our end users about how that might not be the most efficient method, but a method nonetheless, right? So bear in mind what we're working with in those options or with those options. What we may want to be doing at this point is giving our end users some standardized options, right? For workstations, 3 to 4 policies, for servers, 3 to 4 policies. You guys can patch at 8 a.m. for servers and workstations. We can split it up between 8 and noon. We can do, these individual things, but we still do want to take our end users' opinions into account and their needs into account here. So what does this scheduler affect? Everything that we've automatically approved here. So let's go and let's update our approval policy to what I used in the real world, where critical and important are getting approved automatically for other third-party vendors or for Microsoft themselves. All right, and we'll save, close, and let's take a look at global items that are not automatically approved. So we'll come back to our management workflow. Okay, we'll notice we have a missing denotation here. It looks like I've got this missing on, or these 2 items missing on 9 out of my 12 machines. We need to look at installing these patches. We'll go ahead and we will proceed. We'll choose the appropriate behavior. In this case, let's choose approve. We'll select our machine type as necessary. I have 4 servers. There's 9 available patches. Let's select them all. And in this case, we're going to select my entire dashboard because I don't know what machines need this patch or not. So let's just go ahead and push it everywhere. We'll come in, we'll click next, and we see the same behavior that we saw when we were looking at installing an individual patch, where we can now use the existing schedule or scheduling for a new time and controlling the reboot as necessary. So we'll go ahead and apply that, and we will go ahead and move forward. Now, we'll notice those patches have been pulled off the missing list and are now on my pending list, still available for interaction. as necessary. Okay, we'll note in the pending state, they're now no longer missing. So some nice updates there. Paul asks, is there a way to exclude a third-party vendor from automatically updating when selecting approve for critical? Outside of keeping track of those patches, Paul, and coming in and coming to our pending state, let's say Microsoft Edge here, coming to proceed and clicking ignore, we do not have that ability at this time. Okay, so do be aware we cannot differentiate between vendors at the present moment. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. We'll talk about this at the end. Okay. So we will close out here. Now, installing patches, right? We talked about resource drain because everybody's got to download the patch. So we have the ability to set up a site concentrator. And we'll use company one, site one as an option here. So the site concentrator, per its naming convention, can be set up at the site level. We'll come in, edit our site with a right click, come to site concentrator. The site concentrator will allow me from a dropdown to select a server and a port, typically 8123, that we can go and download patches through when they're requested the first time. Every other time they're requested after that, our reset counter just happens. We don't re-download them again. Okay, and we can push those patches through the site concentrator. Please note, benefits of the site concentrator are not limited to patching. It will also handle managed antivirus Bitdefender updates and managed antivirus Bitdefender threat updates. So good resource usage here. Okay, and we'll talk a bit more about the site concentrator as we are going through. All right, backing up a little bit, giving us a quick reminder, we have 5 specific actions that we can take on our patch, right? So coming back to the PowerPoint, we'll quickly go over those. There is approve, which pushes the patch to installation. There is ignore, which takes the patch out of the missing container and puts it into the ignored container, removing it from the missing patch scan, but allowing us to interact with that patch on the global level. Back up a little bit. Approved moves the patch from the missing container to the pending or installing container, depending on how quick that patch gets downloaded. The do nothing denotation will make that patch unavailable for install, okay, once that action is selected, and then it will break the global ability to interact with that patch, okay? So if we come here, let's go to a workstation so we're not messing with one of my demo servers. Patch missing do nothing. We note do nothing keeps the patch inside the container here, right? With a do nothing denotation. If we come to settings, we come to patch management. We come to management workflow. We note that patch no longer exists for global interaction. All right, we'll go ahead and we'll approve this. Okay, just so we get it out of there. Okay, now when we say global, okay, I mean through the management workflow, or through the policy settings, the scope we're choosing. So inside the management workflow, right now, without any clients or sites selected here, we are showing a global view. If I was to come in and click my missing denotation here, we see machines from each different company that need this patch. Now, I can affect that global view by selecting any of these options here. The same goes for our policies, though this is controlled underneath settings. So if we expand out here, we'll note that I have different policies for each of my companies, just to show off some type of flexibility here, right? However, if I wanted to say all servers are going to patch on this particular schedule, well, I can set that up to be global, okay? So global here, when I say that, we're taking that denotation with a little bit of a grain of salt. And what we should probably be saying, though it's way too verbose, is globally depending on the scope that I'm choosing for that individual policy or management workflow action, right? So let's just, cut to the chase and say the scope that we're choosing, or globally, is just easier to say, right? Now, that being said, am I ever really going to want to interact with a patch globally? Probably not, because it goes back to all of my clients are a little bit different, right? As an MSP, we try to standardize as much as possible. I would love to be able to tell you that you can have one patch schedule for servers and one patch schedule for workstations, and any of your clients who don't like that can go kick rocks. Well, we all know that that's just not feasible, okay? If you have that ability as an MSP, I am incredibly jealous. I dealt with 300 devices, 300 as an MSP, single man shop, right? Really small. I still had to have multiple patch management policies. I couldn't even standardize 300 machines, right? What happens when you folks are in the 5, 10, 15, 20,000 device range, the 500 device range, the 1,000 device range? You can't standardize across it all. You're going to have individual policies. All right. So we've got our installation configured properly. We've got our reboots that we're going to be looking at triggering. Okay. We already talked about when we approve on a machine, when we approve through our policy, and when we approve through our management workflow. But what we haven't talked about is the manual way to do this. Okay, our patches get installed. We need to affect behavior. Okay, reboots may be required. So how are we going to handle this? Okay, outside of the approval process, which allows us to control the reboot, or the policies that allow us to control the reboot, right? Here we see our reboot behaviors. All right, let's come back to the top here. Let's go to our mixed tab, and we see our workstation, or sorry, our server right here. We see our nice little blue power button. This tells us as an MSP that reboots have got to happen, okay, for some particular reason. Now we can go to the summary tab, and we'll see why that reboot's required here in my little yellow box. I can come in, select the device, select multiples as necessary, but right-click, reboot now, or schedule. Okay. We like this because now I'm given much more granular control over my reboot process. It gives me much better control over what we are looking at dealing with inside our reboots. And when we talk about the fact that servers probably shouldn't be rebooting on their own, this is what my preferred method was. Now, that being said, again, minimal amount of servers here. Okay, this is dealer's choice. Again, if we do automatically have that reboot happen after the patch, either as always or when required, the end user will get a denotation that the reboot's happening in 5 minutes. Got a good question here. Again, addressing this standardization of policies, right? Do you recommend creating a patch policy for every client as a practice? Okay, or are we looking at doing this more globally? That is copying the default policy and then renaming it for our individual types, right? Be it client or global. If you want to do a patch policy per client as an MSP, that's your particular decision. Though more and more, I am learning that that just isn't scalable. Now, if you had asked me this when I was a sales engineer or a PSM, I would have answered from my experience. 300 devices, right? Roughly 20 to 30 devices per client. So I didn't have many. That's what I did, right? But more and more working with best in class MSPs, those 50 million a year, those 100 million a year MSPs, I'm learning standardization as much as you can leads to scalability and repeatability. And that's the question I truly focus on when I'm looking at how many policies I'm going to create. Is this behavior scalable, and is this behavior repeatable? Sure, there are going to be MSPs that are going to require their own patch schedule. Or not MSPs, end users. It's just the name of the game. There's always going to be somebody that's that different. Okay? Do we want to do that off the bat? Probably not. Right? So it's dealer's choice, but you can quickly, in our feature policy upon creation, base the policy on any of your previously created. So you can make it a little bit simpler in the copying and creation of policies there. All right. Now, for those of us that are newer to Enable, you guys have grown up with PME or Patch Management Engine. For those of us that have been around since the Logic Now or Hound Dog or GFI or SolarWinds days, because our list of company names that once were is just getting longer by the day, you'll may or may not be familiar with the term Patch Management Engine or PME. This was first introduced into the RMM from Enable or from N-Central in 2019. The purpose of this was that, one, it's a newer and faster technology, so we always like that. Two, it gives us the ability to upgrade patch management as its own rather than having to update the entire dashboard or the RMM agent. And it's a custom service, so we can look at putting things inside the automation cookbook that captures information on this. So if we come to our success center and we come to resources, automation cookbook, and we type in, I believe it's under PME, we see repair scripts, we see version scripts that we can run, we see error checks. Gives us a lot of flexibility in working with our tool. If we want one of these items, you can come in, click the item you need, see a brief description on who done it, how it works, and what you use it for, and a download link. What this also brings us to is going to be a couple updates that, again, we're going to hit closer to the end today. So please bear with me. I promise I keep teasing that. I will talk about it. And before our first break, or our only break, we get to network requirements, right? If you are using the site concentrator, there we go. If you are using the site concentrator, please make sure that it can talk to everybody. Okay, the agent typically talks over port 8123. And they both must be able to reach enable or sysenable.com over port 443 and 80. If you're not using the site concentrator, just make sure that the agents can talk through port 443 and or port 80 as a fallback if necessary. Now, wicked fun question here. Okay, when we look at our patching, we'll notice that the option I picked was Firefox, and the patches that we saw Chrome as well. When we update or patch browsers from time to time, they require they be relaunched to update properly. There is not a method inside PME to help that launch. Okay, we have changed it so if Chrome is open, we will still install that patch. Thank you for the help there, Chrome. But we have not gotten a way to affect that relaunch. That still requires some end user interaction. Okay, we can train our end users to do so, right, if necessary. Okay, or what at least I focused on in the real world is we run maintenance on our devices at least on a monthly basis. I hope folks are thinking about weekly maintenance on devices, because let's be honest, that tends to be where we need to sit because of things like reboots. Right? If you're not rebooting machines once a week, that might be an issue for us. So we can come in to the RMM and we can add tasks to our devices that allow for a reboot outside of office hours, okay, to get those devices up and running again and, force Chrome to restart. Or I actually haven't Googled this before. Let's type relaunch Chrome via PowerShell. Well, let's see what Spiceworks says. Yeah, I don't quite see a reboot in here with a quick look. There's probably some way. How do I force Chrome to relaunch? Yeah, that's not. There's probably some way to do it. I just don't know how off the top of my head. Yeah, there's got to be a way to do it via script though. And you could probably do that once a week as well. I'm betting it's out there. I just don't know it. All right. So, patching best practices. So how do other MSPs do this, right? And we've already hit on this as we go through, right? I can't talk about patching without giving my own 2 cents, for better or worse. So we look at how are we going to do this as an MSP. So first off, when we look at our different combinations here of automatic versus manual, we're going to right off say the bookends are wrong. Okay, doing everything fully automatic and installing every patch because it's released automatically when it's released, please know, Microsoft and Adobe are in the real world. Not to pick on Microsoft and Adobe, but they release a lot of patches. And they, for a long time, were the largest offenders of oopsies, right? For lack of a better term. So we need to be aware of that, right? Doing everything manually or doing it not at all, both of those are just straight out. You don't have the time of the day, or you're breaking your contract and somebody's going to sue you if you're in the States. I don't know how the culture is over in Europe with that, but if you breach a contract that bad in the United States, you're going to see some problems, right? So we have our full auto with some declined, where our ignores are happening automatically, right? And we're working almost exclusively out of the management workflow, which is completely appropriate. I've seen some MSPs do this, right? Semi-automatic with some declined, right? Where we have a mix of automatic and manual patches, and the ignore process and the approval process is going to be a mix of automatic and manual. This is probably the most common that we're going to see. The semi-auto with none declined, where everything gets approved, it'll happen, but it's probably not feasible. So we look here at these two middle options, right? Being the ones that, well, or not these two middle, these two kind of in the middle options being the ones that we're going to deal with most as MSPs, right? The let's get in front of it down here at the bottom. Okay, the bottom of these two, right? Right here. And then we'll have the little bit more reactive up top. Now, I say up top is a little bit more reactive because everything is going to be automatically happening. But once something happens, then you have to go back and fix it. I say the bottom one's a little bit proactive because you're affecting change before something automatically happens 25% of the time, 30% of the time, right? So some good options for us. Now, we said we're going over best practices. There's got to be one, right? And there can't be, okay? I lucked out in my real world experience in that I worked with a single vertical, right? And it was one that I had been a part of for a very long time, in that I worked with veterinary offices inside my area. Okay. I worked as a vet tech, I worked as a kennel assistant, right? In that industry for a very long time before I became an MSP to start working with those industries. I had a lot of leeway because I had experience working top to bottom. Well, I don't have a DVM, right? I don't have a doctorate degree, right? But I've done almost every other job, right? I knew how those vets offices worked, so I got to pick one way to do this and have it work for me. Other MSPs that I've talked to, even in a single vertical, there's no one right answer, right? So we pick the two best options for us, the three best options, right? I would pick these two when we look at something here, right? So, right, when we're looking at how are we going to be dealing with this, right, there are a couple questions that we are going to have to work with and we're going to have to answer to make this decision, right? How do you intend to install all these patches, right? The answer should never be manual. We know that's a given answer, but, you know, well, I say manually on each device. So, you know, let's be aware. Okay. Are we going to review and test patches before we're approving them? Does that mean we're going to be looking at almost across our organization, ignoring all patches until we've had them tested somewhere inside our environment? Okay. This was not my groove. Okay. I was not a tester. I was an MSP on the side, right? I didn't have time to test. So what I did is I delayed the install of every patch through my weekly patch schedule to Friday or Saturday. Okay. What that gave me the ability to do is watch patches come out most of the time on Tuesday. Watch the early adopters get hit by whatever was going wrong with those patches. Watch vendors update them, re-release them, and then I'll take the benefit from that. Okay. I wish there was more granularity. I would have loved to delay patches 2 weeks, about 14 days. But inside N-sight's RMM, it's not an option for us, right? So I like that weekend patching. Okay. Now, I got to get away with patching on the weekend because every vet's office in my area, or every veterinary office in this area, is open on Saturday, right? They're even have employees coming in on Sunday to perform maintenance and work with boarders and that type of deal, right? So I had a lot of flexibility when it came to patching, right? How granularly do we learn about these patches? Right? Do I need a day to research? Do I need a week to research? Okay. What are we going to cover inside our scope of work? Right? Or our statement of work. Am I just going to patch Microsoft? Am I just going to patch third-party apps? Am I going to do both? What am I dealing with here? Okay. And as a quick aside, I know a lot of this is Windows-centric. The vast majority of this is Windows-centric. Okay. And for Mac devices, that's okay. We'll talk about patching Macs in a minute. It's super easy. For Linux boxes, that becomes a little bit more difficult, right? And I bring this up here because we're talking about scope, right? As an MSP, if I'm going to patch Windows and Microsoft, I need to be patching Mac at bare minimum. Linux is another ballgame. There's 30 billion different flavors of Linux out there, which means there's 30 billion different patches that are coming out, right? That's a little bit difficult. We'll address that near the end, okay? But what am I patching? Am I going to install and patch drivers? Are they important to me? Right? How am I going to affect that change? Right? Updating hardware is hard. Right? So what does my end user needs entail I'm going to be doing? Right? So once we get those questions answered, that brings us to scheduling. We've talked a lot about scheduling, right? So when we talk about workstations first, let's just do things simple and easy peasy. Not because we don't like workstations, right? But because they are the less mission critical devices. Right? If I really have something go wrong on a workstation, I can have that workstation, at least I could in my MSP, replaced in less than 12 hours. Now, I had a hardware repository that I made sure I could do that with because I was a single man shop, and there's no way I'm going to tell somebody I can't get your laptop ordered for a month because Dell, right? But if that machine, really kicked the can, I'll get you another one up and running pretty darn quickly because I have a repository. A server, replacing a server becomes a different problem. So workstations, simple, easy. Let's keep this consistent, right? First off, I'm running the patch detection scan as a part of the daily safety check cycle. It runs at 10 a.m. I just want to know I'm leaving it in report mode. Sure, fine. That daily safety check cycle takes little to no resources. No end user is going to know it's running unless they're stuck on a box so antiquated you as the MSP should have upgraded it a decade ago, right? So let it go. Okay. For installation, the world's your oyster here. It's your comfort level, right? Are you an MSSP? Right? Do you have your own SOC? All right, we're patching weekly, daily in some cases, right? Are we a MSP that's providing a la carte services, right? More of that break fix style? Maybe I'm patching once a month, right? What works for you here? This is flexible. Again, workstations are never mission critical, right? And how do we do the reboots? In the real world, I was a fan of reboot outside of office hours, right? Now, we all know that that's not really controllable because no matter how many times we talk to Jason in finance or Jane in sales, they never listen to the please do not shut off your devices at night. I will handle your reboots, right? They're both just stubborn, right? Jason's 25 and he knows better than me with tech. Jane is in her mid 50s and she's used to, having an Apple II. Right? She's still not used to modern devices. They're just going to work with what they know or what they think they know. Okay. So, we always need to take that with a grain of salt. But my was, hey, let's do this outside of office hours. Or if you run into a lot of problem children, I'm going to do this during lunch. It's going to happen at noon, right? Or 1. Pick your poison. right? And how do we decide when we're doing this? What are we looking at as our question set here? Is first off, back to what do MSPs sell? Productivity and peace of mind. And that comes back to what does my statement of work say I'm doing? And how do I support my SOPs? So what's my contract say and how does my technician base support that? When do they have time? Right? We go back to, are we delaying? Right? And then we hit, how tolerant are our end users to downtime? Productivity and peace of mind. Right? We're not even going to hit the how old are our devices. Right? We should all have modern devices, especially nowadays, where we see Microsoft becoming quicker and quicker with end of support for their operating systems. We see RMM platforms, N-sight N-sight RMM in Central, right? ConnectWise, DatoTask, right? To name a few, are all becoming more and more stringent about, man, we cannot support these older OSs anymore. Microsoft isn't doing it. We're taking a much harder line if we can't do it. Right? Shoot, enable just end of life support for Windows Vista XP Server, I think 2008 this year. Well, in this past 12 months. Right? And we're now looking at Windows 7 getting end of support. Right? So how old are these devices? We shouldn't even be in that conversation outside of some really niche stuff. Okay. One of the first clients I had and one of the first clients I dropped inside the real world was a manufacturing plant. And what they did was created machine parts for construction and factory equipment that were completely customized. Okay. Their server ran server 2003. Okay, that server was connected to, I think, 3 CNC mills, and it housed all their blueprints and ran those mills. They're a manufacturing plant. They can't take downtime, any downtime. If a manufacturing plant is not running 24 hours a day, they are losing money drastically. So I'd go to this manufacturing plant and tell them, like, guys, we need to take a day to update this server. Can we do it on a day you guys don't have many products that you're producing, or like a holiday, Christmas? I get flat out told, no, it works. It's not broken. Don't try and fix it. And I understood it from their point of view. Okay, but these are things we have to take into account, right? To kind of jump forward a little bit. So what do we recommend as a general best practice in Enable is we run our detection scan at 10 or 10:30. It says 10:30 here. Run it on your daily safety check scan cycle. Okay. And that should be 10 or 10:30. We want the devices to be on. Right? You don't need those checks running at boot. You get bad information on your Windows service checks. That's a lot of white noise. Run them when we know the machines are on. We're going to patch weekly. Right? Pick your poison as to when we're installing it. Okay, I like picking a couple days, Friday, Saturday. All right, and then reboot. I like weekly reboot. Okay, where you get the warning and it's forced. Or you could reboot based on uptime. If the machine's up for 5 days, reboot. And you can go to the automation cookbook and find a reboot based on an uptime script. You could even find a prompted reboot script inside there if you need. Right? You just set it up as an automated task inside the RMM. Simple, easy peasy. Now, servers become a whole different ballgame, okay? Where we see a lot of the same general what do MSPs do? They run it during their day, run the patch scan during their daily safety checks. They're going to patch weekly, monthly, or quarterly. They're going to use some type of site concentrator or that kind of deal, right? When do they reboot? On the weekends or whenever the server is not in use. right? All of that stuff becomes very, very general. But we need to be very, very prescriptive with this. Okay. A lot of workstation stuff, it's up in the air. You heard me say a lot of time, pick your poison. For servers, run your patch scan on your daily safety check, please. Right? Servers are running 24/7. If that scan's running at 6 a.m., your patch status scan's running at 6 a.m. Let's make it easy and standardized across your dashboard so that your SOPs can be standardized across your organization. For installation, do it weekly at minimum. All right? Test, because servers are mission critical, but we patch weekly at minimum. None of this monthly or quarterly thing on servers. Right? And this goes back to malicious actors now have business models around getting information off of devices because it is lucrative. Right? If we haven't gone to a security conference and seen some of what they do, it's nuts. The thing that still baffles my mind is the first security conference I went to a couple years ago. This was probably 2018, 2017. One of the speakers brought up from the dark web this website where what you do is, like you're shopping on Amazon, you go shopping for malware. You can even get the fake credit card or the stolen credit card off of this site and buy it using cryptocurrency. Then using that credit card, you'll purchase the malware you want, enter in a just range of IP addresses, and click OK. That's it. Everything in that particular string of IP or range of IP addresses gets hit with what you purchased. That's insane. Right? Talk about monetizing being a jerk. Right? Servers are where you want to hit. They control the most information. Point blank. Right? So we need to be the most stringent on them. Reboots. I mentioned I like reboots happening manually. I know my servers better than anybody else, probably better than the end users, and I'm going to use that information to know, oh, this data server, we're not going to do a reboot overnight because data dump, syncing, whatever is happening. I'm going to do this at lunch. I'll manually do that. Right? Because I know lunch on Tuesday is the best time for it to happen, maybe Wednesdays or Thursdays, but I want that flexibility. A lot of MSPs just straight schedule it. Okay, use those automated tasks. Use always after the installation of a patch because we're patching overnight anyway, right? Servers never turn off unless we're telling them to reboot anywho. All right, so I cannot stress, be very aware of our servers. All right, then we have our emergency patches. All right, this is when some 3-letter organization, at least in the US, it's a 3-letter organization, gives a patch a name, right? Thunderbolt, something along those lines, and it gets released. Okay. These are items that we're going to have some type of script for, right? Where, we can emergency install them, right? But these are items that are also going to very, very quickly need to be hit. So where we're looking at these patches quite quickly coming into the management workflow here is management workflow. We're either searching a patch name or we're coming to filter by severity, and just quickly looking, okay, I've got critical, let's go. Right? We're then immediately putting in that install, okay, command. We are pushing that through just right now. And then we're emailing and calling our end users. Hey, I'm very sorry. You guys are all going to have to reboot in 5 minutes. Some organization in the United States, CIA, FBI, NSA, right? CDC, somebody tells me this patch has to be released now. Guys, sorry. Patches are all downloading in the next 15 minutes to an hour. Everybody's going to have to reboot their device, no questions asked. Okay? If you haven't heard about it, you'll probably see it on the news in a minute. Right? Brian comes up with a great point. Security aware clients. Yeah, it's a small subset. Right? We got to do it for them. And we've got to talk to them about it. Right? So, out of band patching. Now, back to our Success Center, back to our cookbook. We'll come in. We will do our reboot. So we can see reboot options. Okay, bunch of them as needed, even for Mac. And then if we type in patch, we see some items that allow us to find and push patches as necessary. Okay, so do take a look. Do be aware. Okay. Outside of that, other best practices that we're going to see that we need to discuss are, first up, report and alert mode for our patch status scans. Just be aware of it. Okay. We already saw a demo for this. We already saw how we're going to affect this, right? Just, hey, how are we going to control our nice little patch status scan? Okay, what are we looking at here? What are we dealing with? Okay, what alerts do we have properly set up for us? Okay, just as a nice little rehash of, let's be fully aware of what we're dealing with and work with it as best as we can. Okay. All right. So we've also talked about this as well, where we see patching by client or globally. We've talked about this. Scalable and repeatable, just a rehash. We're not going to go through this whole slide. We've already hit all of this inside our conversation. If we need to hit this again, I've done something very wrong as a presenter to stress that no two clients are exactly the same, but your patch process needs to be scalable and repeatable and defined in your statement of work inside your contract and inside your standard operating procedures inside your organization, preferably inside whatever ticketing system you're using. Okay. We do need to quickly address, though, every client is going to think they're special. Typically, because when we're selling to that client, we're talking to a CEO or a business owner. Okay. And one of the common things amongst business owners that we all know as MSPs, being the owner of an MSP ourselves or working in an MSP, every business owner thinks they are going to do this the right way. You have to have that type of confidence to take the risk of opening your own business. You cannot be second guessing yourself when you're running a business. You've got to be confident and think you know best, which means with these CEOs, we're going to have to sit down and have a conversation with them that, you're not that special, right? You are unique, but here's what you need versus what you're asking for. What you're asking for in cases A, B, C, and D is quite easily handleable. But F and G, those just aren't. They're not needed. They're not appropriate. Here's why. That conversation will need to happen from time to time. So do be aware of what you're seeing there. Okay. Be aware of what you're asking or what these folks are telling you to do. Okay. All right. Now, Last little bit of this. Mac and Linux. Okay. Linux boxes, we already discussed. Patching's just a pain. There's 1,000,001 flavors, which means 1,000,001 patches. So we're going to have to look at doing this either through some type of scripting, okay, or some type of manual installation. It just is what it is with Linux, okay? Some type of SSH into the device or script to install those updates. It's just the nature of the beast, okay? If you guys do script for Linux boxes, I'd love to hear about it. I'd love to see it because I'd love to, honestly, steal it and put it inside the automation cookbook, right? Anybody working that closely with Linux tends to know Linux very well, and I would love to take some of your expertise. Okay, I will openly admit I'm not a good Linux user. So anything that can help me and the other MSPs inside this organization get better with Linux, I will happily take. Okay, but Mac is done by an automated task that's been preloaded inside N-sight RMM. So how do we work with that? Oops, we'll go back, get to our demo slide, and we will find our Mac. Yay. And we should have a couple in here. We do. Good, good. Okay. Tasks. Underneath the Tasks tab, we will have an automated task that we can add called Run Managed Patch, adding it to a single device here. Of course, you could add this task through monitoring templates or through an entire client site level as necessary. Okay. Give the task a nice little name. Be more inventive than just slamming some letters on your keyboard. And we are going to look at the parameters we have, whether or not we want to prompt users to install Apple updates. Okay, I'm going to uninstall this or not prompt them. We're just going to do it, right? And then am I going to be in testing mode or production mode? Testing mode is what it sounds like. Enable will test the, testing mode is not run by enable. That means what we're going to do here at enable is we're going to delay patches up to 24 hours and you're going to push them. Okay, this is not for your end users. This is for you as an MSP to test patches that are in beta, pretty much. Okay, if you want this to go out to your end users, please note that you can, but I am not recommending it. I recommend that you guys are patching 99.99% of the time in production mode, where Brian Best, our Mac PM, and his dev team will test all patches before pushing them through this automated script. That means those patches are going to be delayed about 7 days for testing. Some will get released as quick as 4. Some will get delayed up to about 10 I've seen. Okay, but it means that you don't have to test these patches. Okay, Brian runs a Mac-centric MSP while being RPM. Over 1,000 Macs, I believe, at last count. It's pretty darn good. I trust the man. Right? Enter in any command line parameters that may be necessary. 99% of us, 95% of us are not going to use this. This is for advanced users, to the point that Brian Best's, our Mac PM's, best practice with this is don't touch command prompt unless you know exactly what you're going to put in there. So if you see that command prompt box and you go, huh, what should be there? Nothing is the answer. If you look at that box and go, ooh, I can do something cool, use it. Okay, then we could run the script if the user's logged out or not, and hide any OS notifications when the script is run. Hiding OS notifications is always nice. Let's click that. I don't want to bother my end users. The run if users logged out means, well, now I'm going to have two sides to this script. Because in honesty, we're doing everything in the background. I don't care if the user's logged in or not. So I'm going to set up 2 ways to do this. Run if the user's logged out, run if the user's logged in. And I'll have them named in that manner. Click next, schedule daily, weekly, or monthly as necessary. Please, let's not use these 2 bottom options because we can automate it. select your days and time. Maximum permitted execution time here, I typically bump this up to 2 hours as a best practice. Click finish, you're good to go. We can report on Windows patching under our patch management reports as necessary. And under patch management reports, we have our managed patch for Mac report that we can even run. Okay, not giving reports time to load. I've already talked enough for today. So we'll be aware of what we're seeing there. Okay. All right. Site concentrator. We already talked about this a little bit. We saw where we're going to set it up, but let's talk about what else we can do inside the site concentrator. So when we come, let's go back to our site. Let's edit our site and let's come to site concentrator. Okay. We can interact with our Windows firewall to open if necessary. Okay. But more importantly, we can specify a cache path. Okay. The user manual, I believe, says that the site concentrator is going to need something like 2 to 4 gig to work properly. I always think we're going to need 10 just to be on the safe side and give the site concentrator enough space. So I'm almost never, because this is on a server, putting it on the boot drive. It's always going on the storage drive. So I'll come in and I'll pick a drive D if it's available, right? And put in my custom path as necessary. Now, the cache will clean itself. We already saw 30 days, right? So you won't have to maintain that, and 10 gig is probably well over what you're ever going to use, but better to be safe than sorry. We can also enter in any proxy information that we may have and enter in any authentication that we may need for that proxy inside our site concentrator. Okay. The other unique thing that you can do is upon manual installation of a workstation into the RMM, you sitting in front of the device, manually downloading the agent and installing it, you have the ability, okay, to designate a workstation as a server. You could promote it. That workstation could then be a site concentrator. So we can come here, we can come to laptop, we can right click, we can edit the site, come to the site concentrator, and we note that I can pick my enabled device right here. It's a Dell, I believe it's 5520 laptop, 5510 laptop, right? Now, that's a powerful tool. I ran the WEI, right, scan just to see how powerful my device was. Windows ranks everything in the device on a 0.00 to 0.00 to 9.9 scale, 9.9 being the best, 0 being you have a glorified paperweight, right? My overall score of my machine was an 8.2. Average is 4 to 5. High performance devices score a 6. This tells me for a laptop, this is about as powerful as I'm going to get. I am just a smidge below what a gaming laptop should be, and a high-powered gaming laptop at that. So even with this powerful of a device, site concentrators as a workstation, 5 devices, 10 devices, no more. It's done in extreme situations. I'm dealing with a lawyer's office. They do not have a server. I'm going to use one of their workstations because they're stuck inside some remote town that has limited internet connection, right? Very, very rarely should we ever be doing this from a workstation. 5 to 10 devices at most, okay? When you come and you pick a drive for your cache path, you have to specify the path. Go on the server, create the folder that you want the cache to be, and you pump it into the RMM. It will not automatically create itself. So let's be aware there. Last but not least, where do I start? We talked a lot about best practices. We talked a lot about how to do this today. The real deal of how to start is document, document, document. How am I doing today? What should I be doing tomorrow? And move from there. Because every SOP you document turns into an SOW inside a contract. Every SOW can turn in and resolve or align itself with the proper SLAs. It allows us to find where to get started ourselves. There's no guaranteed place. All right, that all being said, some basic resources here if you want to take a screenshot. The MSP Institute is one of the best resources for education. We already talked about the cookbook. We already talked about the Success Center. Hit up our blogs, go to our forums. Let's interact as a community. We'll go back to our Q&A. First question we have, reporting. What's a good report for our end users? Depends on how technical they are, is the answer to that question. The executive summary report, we'll run this for one of my companies here, is a good beginning point. Namely, because it gives you a patch score. Now, we look at the executive summary report here, and there's probably a oh crap moment that's happening for most of us looking at this. I scored a 53% in protection and a 68% in patch management overall. Now, how's this affected? First off, company one has a Mac in it. Mac's never going to show up on the patch status scan or the executive summary report because it runs as a task. It's not the actual solution. The solution itself here is tracking patch management or PME, which is Windows only. Grain of salt. Secondly, protection means the patch is installed. So if we look at October, it ended on the 31st. November began on the 1st. And anything that was released on the 31st and the 30th wasn't installed until the 4th on every device. And it looks like there was a good amount of patches installed, right? So some items here we're looking at inside this reporting to be aware of. Outside of that, if we have a more technical end user, okay. Oh, sorry, my calendar didn't show on my screen. My apologies there. It was really just saying that the end of the month was in the middle of a week before I had time to patch, and that dropped my patch protection percentage down. Very easy to correlate, very easy to understand there. Outside of that, we have our patch reports. It's going to depend on your end user's level of competency, right? Where we look at pushing these patches, okay? Or pushing these reports. The failure report is almost never going to be sent to a client because it's showing we're failing a little bit. This is internal. The overview report is run by client. I would say let's run missing, pending, installed, and let's sit there, right? Because when we generate this report, it's just so much information, right? Or come in and say kill installed and just run what's missing, pending, and installing and give them the appropriate information, okay? But that overview report probably going to be the best bet for our technical clients. The unfortunate side effect of that overview report is one, it can be exported as a CSV, so it's not the prettiest, okay, or XML. We don't have a PDF, unfortunately, right? And it's just gonna be bulky. There is no automatic scheduling of this report. Okay, so we do have to be aware of that. All right, last item I said I would talk about today is going to be our future-looking statement. Okay, we talked a lot today about patching by severity inside our patch policies. Hopefully coming shortly, January or February timeframe, Q1. We're going to update and overhaul PME inside the RMM. And the biggest change that we're going to see from this is that we are going to start patching by feature. So inside our Windows patching, we'll see security updates, we'll see feature updates. For our third-party apps, I don't quite know the delineations yet, but we're going to start more granularly patching as necessary. This is huge for us. This completely changes the game, though. Okay, we'll have to be more cognizant of what we're choosing, and it gives us the ability to patch by third-party app as far as I know. So now we can delay all Chrome patches to ignored, but install all QuickBook patches as automatically approved. Okay, we'll see more on that as it comes. The immediate time that is released, I will be doing, well, I shouldn't say immediate. The office hours, RMM office hours, immediately after that update is released, I will be going over that inside the office hours. That is just a given. Okay, so keep an eye out for it. Status.enable.com, releasenotes.enable.com. Keep an eye out. It's going to up our patching capabilities inside the RMM a lot. All right, folks, it was a pleasure. I will stay until you guys stop asking questions, but right now it looks like I've got everything answered inside the questions pane. So I'm going to sit for just a couple more seconds, see if anybody gets anything else in. And if not, I'm going to go ahead and kill the webinar for us all. It was a pleasure having such an interactive set of folks here today. And this is one of my favorite webinars because it just, beginner, intermediate, or advanced, there's always a tidbit you can pull from it, and a tidbit's better than nothing. Alrighty, folks. It was a pleasure again. Look forward to seeing you guys in our next boot camp. Bye-bye.